I'm a congenital amputee. I was born 41 years ago in a small town in New York State, United States, without the extension of my arms and legs. I stand 3 foot 9 inches tall. My arms end at where your elbows are, and my legs are the lower half of my leg fused to my hip area. And spent a lifetime of avoiding a disability, and got my education, started a career in media and television, working for television stations for the past 20 years, and now in video production, avoiding it.
Yeah, you just use that term, avoiding disability. What do you mean by that?
My disability.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I didn't watch video of myself, and I didn't look in mirrors, and I purposefully didn't want to see what I look like, because I wanted to be like everybody else. To use an awful term, I wanted to be normal, whatever normal was that I had built up in my head. And it allowed me the mental space to be able to go out and forge ahead through life in a sales environment, in a business environment, to make a career for myself. Over the past 2 years, about 2 years ago, somebody that I hired, that I trusted in videography to work on client projects, turned it back around on me and said, "Hey, I want to tell your story. I watch businesses and business meetings where people want to ask you questions." And he said, "I want to do that for them." I said, "Okay."
It's an interesting career you've had. You've now got the senior executive position in US public television. What's your involvement there?
I am a general manager for the video production arm of New York State Public Broadcasting. So we produce short-form videos, long-form videos, YouTube videos, corporate videos, and documentaries as they come together. So my role is to bring those projects in, to get those projects funded, and to allocate the resources to be able to execute the projects.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because in the field in which you work, normal today, in technological terms, is vastly different to what it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So in the work sense, you can see how normal becomes superseded, and in your own life, normal is a changeable term.
Yes, absolutely. The thing about media and all of business, if you go back to 1994 when I started my career, there was no internet per se. There was no email. So you communicated by picking up the phone and you call people, or you walk into a business and you speak to somebody. And then very rapidly, the internet took over as the medium of communications in business. And so as that happened, it made the world much easier for me to adapt to in a business environment. And so I could use the resources that I've been given, which is good communication skills on the telephone or on email or one-on-one with an individual, but I can do it more rapidly with communications as they are today.
In your personal life, what were some of the major changes? In the little bit I read about your life, it seems that when you got to the end of high school, you made a conscious decision to be even more independent and worked on quite a few ways to be able to live a life where, I think you said in one documentary, where you could dress yourself using all sorts of different techniques. What was the catalyst for that change?
I think the catalyst for that change was I very purposefully did not want to be a burden on someone else. I didn't want to be a burden on my parents. I didn't want to be a burden on society. I wanted to be a tax-paying citizen, not a tax-receiving citizen. It would have been easy for me to sit at home and collect social insurance, much easier in the U.S. even than maybe it is here. I didn't want that. I wanted anything but that. And so I'd been given a great education, which I took for granted for a long time. And then at the end of high school, and as I went into the university, I realized this is a great opportunity. This can get me to where I want to be. It's time to start putting some of these pieces together.
What was the most difficult part of that process?
I think the mental part of it, the growing up that I needed to do to realize that the world isn't ready. Just because I say I'm ready to go out and work, the world isn't ready to hire a 3'9" media salesperson necessarily. I'm not the cookie cutter image of what somebody's looking for. So it's the mental process of training myself on how to deal with potential employers and realizing it takes time, and it probably in my case is going to take more time to get over any sort of prejudice that there might be, to paint a picture with an employer that I can do this, that takes time. And it's taken 20 years to get to a point where now I can choose the jobs that I have, and I'm blessed with that.
There would have been a
It's
few
taken time.
disappointments, I imagine, in that process. There would have been people and organisations who would have felt some unease.
Very much so. Very much so. I tell a story to many of the talks that I give about a job promotion that I was flown to half the country away. I was very excited about this potential promotion. I didn't say anything to them about my disability or my physical presence. And when I got off the plane and got there, the man was so visibly shaken about how I looked that the interview pretty much ended there. And I flew home and realized that I couldn't work for somebody that was that uncomfortable with me, and I was upset that it got to that point. And I was asking myself, do I need to say something on the telephone? And a good friend of mine said, well, do you want the job? And I said, but if I'm any other ethnic group or have any other diversity, I don't say it on the telephone. But he said, do you want the job? And maybe, much the way you do in your everyday life, John, if you can make a joke about it or make light of it and make people comfortable, that you're comfortable with yourself, and if you can do that on the phone before the interview happens in person, then they built it in their head to be expecting something a little bit.
So you take the shock factor out of it. Now, you're a golfer as well, and I've seen you play golf, and you play it better than I do, I think. How often do you play golf? Well, in fact, go back a step from that. Why did you decide to take on that task?
The best thing that my father ever did for me was when I was about 8 years old, he went and found a left-handed 7-iron and cut it in half and re-gripped it and said, let's go. And so when he would go play golf, I'd have a putter and a 7-iron, and I'd play from 50 yards in. And then from that point, I'd spent summers on my grandparents' farm, and I'd cut holes in the lawn, and I made my own little 3-hole golf course. And it just kept going from there. My uncle would take me every week with his buddies. I play once a week in good weather. We don't get the good weather that you get here, where you can play 12 months a year. We can play maybe 7 months a year, 8 months a year. But I do try to play once a week if I can.
So have you got a handicap?
I shoot about 100 for 9 holes, so it's 28. Give or take. It depends. Courses are getting longer now, so my game isn't getting longer, so the number goes up.
You've probably got a better game than some of the previous presidents of the United States who we've seen.
And they have more time to play.
Yeah. Now, you're here at the at WorkCover's annual conference, which has a focus or a theme on return to work and overcoming injuries. You're about to speak. What's your approach?
My approach is very simply to share my story. I try very hard not to preach to other people, but to share my story in hopes that at the end of the story, somebody gets something out of it. And what I hope they get out of it is hope. That, I don't necessarily say it this way, but if you hear my story and realize some of the trials and tribulations that I went through, if you have the opportunity to go through whatever stands in your way, whether it's work or not, but it probably is work in this case, that there's a path to get through it and get to the other side, and that it's that important. Or if you're an employer and you need to think a little bit different about who you're hiring. You know, if you can hear my story and realize maybe there's a pool of potential employees out there that are interested, or if someone gets hurt, and certainly in this case, and both the employer and the individual need to see the success of other people and how they, overcome whatever obstacle they face, then that's what I hope somebody gets out of it.